Yes. Here we are on ADD Experience Live, Mr. Benja's ADD Experience Live to discuss Dune. Dune, you've heard about it. You may not have known about it. All of a sudden, it hit the airwaves, it hit the theaters. Boom. And Dune is out there making everybody go crazy, everybody go nuts in the science fiction world. So today we're going to have a little discussion, a four-way discussion with three other people. It's usually just me, but we're going to have not one, not two, but three other people. We're going to have Donnie on. You remember him from before, Donnie Cornwell. We're going to have Andy Lowe on. You remember him from before. And we're going to have Abut on. You remember him before. So we're going to have a recurring group of people come back through here and talk about Dune, what it means to society, what it means to science fiction, what we can learn from it, why it's such a phenomenon and the way that it is. So should be a pretty interesting discussion. Want to make sure that, I don't know, the four-way discussion even works. So this is how we do things. We're going to do it here live.
It looks so cinematic because I'm like, wow, you look from like a nice grungy planet. Like, yeah, no, it looks cool, man.
All right. So now that everybody's in here, I want to go ahead and offer some introductions up real quick. As everybody knows, I'm Mr. Benja.
Yeah, you can cut everything up to here.
Yeah.
When you edit this.
Exactly. Fix it in post. We'll fix it in post.
So I am Mr. Benja. I run the ADD Experience podcast that is art, design, and development. And we're always trying to add experience for those of you who want to know what that triple entendre was about. I like to talk to creatives, interesting people about interesting things. And Dune is a very interesting phenomenon that's been around a while and it's getting a resurgence. And we think there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. So in order of joining and promptness to the podcast, we'll start with Donnie here. Donnie Cornwell. Quick little intro on yourself.
Yeah, I'm a game designer and game developer for 20 plus years. Been obsessed with science fiction my whole life. Started with Star Wars as a kid. And as far as Dune, I know there's much more serious fans. I'm sure there's probably a thesis or few that somebody's written and defended on the topic. So I'm definitely not an expert, but I'm a journeyman expert on Dune.
All right. Have you read through the books?
I've read the Frank Herbert authored books.
Okay, you read the Frank Herbert authored books. Okay, so we'll go from there. Thank you.
Yep.
And next up we have Al.
Hey, alphabetically, I should have been first. I'm annoyed that I joined second because I was there on your page, man. I was waiting with the trigger thing. I also am part of the old-planning crew of about 20 years of experience in startups, mainly startups. So I make web apps and mobile apps. I'm a designer, and most recently, as right now, my current gig is building an AR app for the construction industry and architecture industry called Sitescape.ai. And that's where Benj and I had a fantastic conversation a few weeks ago about AR and VR and metaverse, all that interesting stuff. My background with Dune is recent but deep. So I just barely got into it like 2 months ago, but I read all 6 of the Frank Herbert books. I just started getting into the Sons books because tragically Frank Herbert died before the last novel to wrap up that entire sort of Skywalker trilogy, Skywalker saga in essence. And so his son took up the mantle, and I have lots to say about that too. Really interesting story. And but very recent. So all post trailer. The first trailer I saw, I started reading. When I've been reading the books, I've been in this weird place where the casting is perfect in my mind.
Yeah.
That man, Al, you went hard.
Oh man, I went after it because we can get into it, but like basically I couldn't stop raving about it to Benja in our conversation because I love it. I just absolutely love it.
So then you had you seen the movie, like the 84 one, or was this your first introduction to it?
So I've had vague recollections as a kid.
Okay.
And after I'd read the first book and the first couple books, and I was so impatient for this book to come out, I tried to go back and rewatch it. And it was so terrible that I stopped like halfway through. I think To be fair, I think I was also pretty high at the time. So
That usually helps.
I let no, that makes it better.
Yeah, it usually has the opposite effect.
that's where I was going with this. And I thought like maybe I got like a bad batch or some shit. Cause like this should work. But no, it felt like
That's a different franchise.
that's what I did wrong. This shit didn't make sense. Oh, there's no works. But no, it's how do I put it? Like I did watch it. I haven't watched a TV series. Apparently there's a TV series.
Yeah.
But everything that I've sort of seen
starring oh God, what's his face? Professor Anna.
that's right. Yeah.
And his name
Scottish guy.
McAvoy.
Yeah. Basically I saw clips of that. I watched half the other thing, and I'm also, I should say, a big fan of Denis Villeneuve. I'm not French.
Villeneuve.
And it, from what I understand, the way he described it, the sci-fi movies he's done up until now, he's been offered to do Dune for years. He said, I needed to do Arrival and Blade Runner 2049, et cetera, to prove I could do sci-fi, sort of like build up his chops for doing this. And so from the first trailer on, I was like, no, this is going to be the thing.
All right, cool. Well, that's Abut for that. Now we've got finally, I'm so glad we could have Andy on. I thought we were going to have some weird technical difficulties, but we made it in. Andy Lowe, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name is Andy Lowe. I am a theater director, also a writer, reformed performer, and now I'm a theater producer in Los Angeles at East West Players, one of the longest running theaters of color in the nation. And what is it? We're talking about who we are and our relationship to Dune.
Yeah, pretty much how you got into Dune, or yeah.
So yeah, I have zero relationship to Dune itself, other than I just saw the movie and was blown away and was very excited. I mean, I remember the original 1984 film, but as I've told at least two of you before, like that was like I was 9 and it was 1984, and it was like there's a lot of cool, crazy things going on. I have no fucking clue what any of this is, and why is this fat guy flying around and slimy? Right, that was it. But it's like there are those scenes that even like being thoroughly confused by the movie, definitely stuck with me. Like the fat guy flying around and seeing Captain Picard with like hair riding a worm, and what else? Oh, Sting in a in a plastic Speedo. I mean, like there's like the nose, iconic, the weird little the nose things.
Yeah.
I remember like there's stuff going on here. I have no idea what's going on. So I've always been interested in waiting for someone to do a proper thing. I've never read the books.
Okay.
I picked up things that I understand why Dune is important to the rest of sci-fi.
Yeah.
Because everything from Tremors to Star Wars, there's all of this Dune love and how Dune kind of shaped a lot of contemporary sci-fi. So that's really interesting. In terms of Denis Villeneuve, the guy, yes. Yeah, that guy.
Villeneuve.
I don't think it's Italian.
Villeneuve.
I loved Blade Runner 2049. And I was going into it with some skepticism, but love for Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner. But I was very unhappy with Arrival. Arrival was like very frustrating to me because I was just like, I felt like if you watched any Star Trek at all, you knew exactly what this movie was about in the first 15 minutes. So when it got to the point where it took like 2 hours to get to the big reveal that the aliens, no alert. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
You're right. Like the idea of it was like, I knew that like 2 hours ago. Why did we?
Maybe that's why I
here?
enjoyed it, because I was like a dummy that sat there going, that's what's.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. I was like, I was waiting for a bigger reveal, and I was like, wait, I thought we already revealed that.
All right. So,
but I love his visual style. I mean, like I am to his visual style the way Benja is to Snyder's visual style.
I did not know. I did not hear a Snyder fan.
ladies and gentlemen.
I feel like I'm still getting to know you. What?
And you are.
Snyder. Wow.
And so yes, that's a perfect lead in. Andy, you are going to be the visual correspondent here. We're going to be talking to you about the colors and the use of the bong sound and everything.
So Benja, what's your background to Dune? Because I remember when we last spoke, you were new to all of it as well, right?
Yeah, so I remember the Dune series, the Dune movie from '84, pretty fondly actually. And as you said, the fat guy flying around, that burned in my head, and I really liked it. Thought it was weird, but I felt it kind of as a one-off, right? And over the years, I kept hearing people talk about, yo, man, Dune, da 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 da. Yo, they're gonna have a sci-fi. I'm like, okay, it was kind of an interesting movie way back, but I never picked up on it until much more recently when I heard, Denis Villeneuve was going to be doing this big movie. I was like, okay, now I need to kind of check into this. I've had the books sitting here on my shelf for a while, like unplayed games, still haven't played them. So I've been doing kind of I don't want to say a crash course, but a crash course on a lot of the Dune stuff, why it matters, the why they call it, like a adult Star Wars, why people say it's really complicated but still adore it. There's a lot kind of that just interested me. And most recently, I was talking with Theo and I was thinking, I think sci-fi is on the downturn. And then Dune comes out and it's a big success. And I'm like, oh, here we go. Now we have a resurgence. So that's kind of my impetus and my positioning on it right now, where I'm at. I saw the movie, I really enjoyed it, liked a lot of what they were doing, and kind of started to get the bigger concepts that are being put into this film and this series that I didn't really catch on to before. So now I'm coming at it with a newer appreciation. And
for those of us that are watching us visually, by the way, we're paired up perfectly in order to play doubles tennis with, each team has a newbie and a veteran to the book.
Yeah.
And different specialties. So like I'm looking for the cross court forehands here. If I'm gonna hit it Andy or Donnie. Yeah.
So really quickly, it's done well in theaters. So that's a good sign. People are digging it. 40 million plus in the box office opening weekend, and the box
greenlit for 2 today.
And that is a little Hollywood trick they probably did, where it's like, well, hey, let's announce it, and then on the second week we may be able to go ahead and say we have a part 2 coming. So people are going to be like, oh, there's a part 2 coming. Well, gee, I better go watch the first one. So we'll get a bigger return.
I love how the announcement was like, oh, the HBO exec was like, or Warner Brothers exec was like, oh, we love it so much. We didn't wait to see what the numbers are like. It's about the movie itself and how it came out. And I'm like, yeah, you say that after it had a smash opening weekend and made what you were hoping it would make. Yeah.
So let me jump in really with the sci-fi question here that kind of everyone's asking. Like, why, for those who don't know, why do you think Dune matters? I mean, isn't it just sci-fi? Why does Dune actually matter?
I think we could do well by sort of defining sci-fi, right?
Go ahead.
And I think it's a big genre, but I think it really, in its core, is about how what humanity's place in the future somehow, right? That's kind of its basic. And I think that maybe makes a distinction where it separates something like Star Wars, where Star Wars is sort of like cowboys in the future, but it doesn't really examine what humanity's place is in that future, as opposed to Dune, which talks about politics and religion and culture and ecology and the impact of humanity in the future. And I think that's sort of a good distinction to make. That's sort of how I distinct or separate the two in that way.
All right. How does that sound to you guys?
And there's lots of ways to interpret it other than that.
I mean, I think yes, and to yes and that, I mean, really it's to me, all of this is about creating safe space and allegory, right? Very much Herbert is talking about the realities of issues in 1960. What was it, 1966 when it was written?
55.
The 50s.
56?
50s, 59, 57, something like that. 56 maybe. Yeah, 50s.
I mean, so yes, you have a lot of kind of safe space in that it's, the future, and it's, far off planets to kind of talk about allegorically social issues that are very much of then and also reflect now. I mean, that's why it still has impact. Is that, all of these very thinly veiled allegories of, Arrakis to Iraq, spice for whether it's coffee or oil, decide, lots of people can debate over, what resource that's affecting you, or how
It could be the salt trade, right? If you go back,
Yeah.
why not?
totally.
Yeah.
The threads of imperialism, right? All of it kind of come back and keep it relevant and create a space where we can talk about demagogues and how religion or kind of fuels social movements and the danger thereof and so forth.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of those. Like at its best, sci-fi both makes me imagine a future while also being like a commentary on today and where we come from. There's a quote on the back of my paperback version that's the shortest, pithiest answer to this that I've seen, and it's a New Yorker quote saying, "Possibly even more relevant today." That's how I felt about it when I was reading it. Was like, I can't believe this was written decades ago. Not because it predicted things in the small, like, oh, computer on your wrist or whatever, but because of the human angle. Like, if you think about when it was written in the 50s, he was clearly looking at sort of World War II Bedouin and how they were being exploited and how they were being used for World War II and then divvied up afterwards for their resources and et cetera. So that makes sense as a starting point.
Which that didn't start in World War II.
Yeah.
It goes way further back. It was perpetual.
Sure, of course. And in World War II, I'll put it, say, like, it came to a head, right? It came to like these imperial forces, like conflicting on top of this indigenous population, which the book goes. So there's two answers, like, why is this book important, and then why is it so interesting and relevant that it's being turned into movies now? The book goes really, really deep on things that normally I would say science fiction doesn't capture, which is also the flip side of why this book is an underground hit. It's not really made for kids. Like, kind of like the way the movie went over our heads for those of us that are old enough to remember it. Like, the book is like that for a lot of people. Like we Benja, we said in our last conversation, I read science fiction voraciously growing up. So how did I miss the best-selling science fiction book of all time? Because it had no robots and computers. It didn't try to simplify things because it got into some. It didn't just mention religion as like a friendly force to use the force with. Like, it really got into jihads and when the oppressed become the oppressors and sticky, thorny issues. And so, and he did that for environment, and he did that for role of women, and he did that for a whole bunch of things. So, it's definitely a masterpiece. It's very, very dense. I would definitely encourage anyone today, though, to dive into it, because I've heard for so long, oh, it's this dense thing. Oh, it's unfilmable. I think it's had such a cultural impact that it's less dense now, because I found it just a great read. And the books that come after are even more fast paced and more sort of like hero driven. It's almost like he took a lifetime of trying to be like a published science fiction author and put all of it into like his first attempt. And that's why it's so dense. I think he put like the fact that this movie is broken into two is not an accident. I think the book should have probably been like 3 or 4 books. So
It was published in 2 parts as well.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
Astounding Magazine, I think it was a 2-part
Yeah.
publish. So
I would say that there's a reason it's the best selling science fiction book of all time. There's a reason that it's still sort of an underground hit, because it's these approachability issues for those that come at it. Like, the sort of Star Wars for adults, it's sort of the opposite. It's like Star Wars is like Dune for kids.
yeah,
so that it's not dumbed down at all, and it's very, very dense and rewarding.
So, okay, now that it's the story is very dense, it's very rewarding, and I heard that a lot. So when I went to the movie, I was going to go to the actual movies, and I punked out. I said, you know what? My HBO Max subscription is going to run out soon because I'm dropping some of these services. Let me get the last little bit of juice out of it and watch it at home. And I kind of didn't want to be spoiled by the display of it all. If it was a good story, I wanted to see that come through on a smaller screen. I was like, can the story actually grip me, and does it do it right?
Very interesting.
So that was actually my decision going in. So I said, okay, let me try this. I started watching it, and when I'm at home, I tend to get distracted by I'm starting something, and it's like, I should have a Fig Newton, and I'll go like start unwrapping something. Very minor distractions, when I'm sitting there.
Which is, just to interrupt, this is exactly why I didn't tell my wife that it was on HBO until literally we're driving to the theater. And she said, what? Because she's parent. It was her first COVID movie.
Yeah.
She double masked. She was anxious. I'm like, I'm sorry, honey. I know you would have bailed. And I need to see this in the theater.
Yeah. Exactly. So, I kind of didn't want the visual beauty of it to warp my perception of the story and what it was trying to tell. And here's where I want to go to Andy for this, because I started watching it, and as I'm watching it and kind of being lightly distracted, the beginning of it is slow. I mean, not slow. It's
Methodical.
methodical. There we go. It's kind of methodical. So I'm watching it and like, okay, they're setting up the stage here. They're focusing on this. They're doing that. And I'm kind of thinking like other sci-fi movies where it's like, okay, they're just showing me the grandeur and I can kind of skip past it. But that wasn't the case. I forgot the exact thing, but I kept getting brought back by little bits where I had to actually look at the screen, where I'm looking away and I'm like, okay, hold on, what was that? And that keyed into the visual storytelling that there's quite a bit of. So I think at some point I had to stop and actually turn stuff off, sit cross-legged on the couch and just kind of actually watch. Andy, you said something about visual storytelling in our discussions. How did the visual storytelling hit you for this?
I mean, he's very conscious about frame as a, storytelling or a character device, right? Moments when characters are intentionally dwarfed by frame to either show their own smallness or the weight of the responsibility weighing on them, or the way he's using atmospherics. He's using, whether it's sand blowing or it's fog, right? There's like the scene, and no spoilers, but there's like a scene where two characters realize there is a lie that has been standing between them for much of their lives.
Oh, we're spoiling, by the way.
Oh, we are.
Yeah, let's
yeah, we have to.
Okay, yeah.
We do?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Oh.
yeah. Well, but you guys know the scene I'm talking about, and right, and it's like there where you don't just go to shot counter shot. It's shot, then of like a 3/4 shot where there's mist and the person is kind of slightly blurry and obscured by the fog, and then the counter shot, and then you go back and you have the counter shot with the mist again, and they are
even blurrier.
There's a whole thing about, do I trust you? Do I know you? And that's all in camera, right? That's all just the frame doing it. Not a single line of dialogue is doing this. That's frame.
Yeah.
And that's just, very exciting to see, both as a director and as, just a visual storyteller of there's thought to this. There's character in
Yeah.
How did that make you feel about the characters in that scene?
Oh, I heard
they've got
in the theater. I heard the sharp intakes in the theater, including
like as somebody who's new to Dune, I was asking Andy, like between Paul and Jessica, what did that tell you about their relationship?
It's interesting because it's very much filmed from Paul's perspective, so we're definitely supposed to see things from the eyes of Paul, but it immediately also makes him ambiguous too, right?
He's drifting away from his mother.
Yeah. Well, but in terms of who you ally with or who you see the movie through, like that was something of after that point, you start seeing the movie through the mother's eyes more.
Yeah.
right? So, and she becomes the more identifiable character as he gets bigger and kind of more bigger for his britches. So we get to the climax of the film and, he's taking charge, right?
The important thing that happened there is it was after the Gom Jabbar test. And what had happened is very significant. The Kwisatz Haderach had awoken, and his mother, that's probably the first time his mother began to fear him. So it's a big, big scene. And there's little touches like that through the whole movie that are sort of there for people who are deep in the lore can pick up. But it's cool to see that somebody new to it got a similar sort of feel. So
what's nice about the Gom Jabbar scene too is that
best scene in the movie.
Yeah, it is an amazing scene. What's nice about it is that because it's early in the book and it's so prominent, it's something you see a lot. You can look up on YouTube this interview by the director, where I think it's Variety that does these things, where it's called the scene breakdown, and the director goes through what they did, and it's like there's so much packed into that one scene that for me that scene was sort of like a litmus test. Because first off, about spoilers, I'll try to be spoiler free because like I was 80 years late to literally 80 plus years late to this book, and I was like, I loved it. That was a big part of enjoying it. You know what I mean? So I'll try. Like
We're already spoiling. That's what I'm saying.
well, no. So anyone that's watched too late, we'll try our best not to, because I think there is so much discussed without it being actually about the plot. Because there's the book, and then there's the influence on culture. There's the movie. But going back to that,
Hold on. Here's the thing. We're people watching this will probably have seen the movie and may take this information into a second viewing, because I know I had new revelations on my second viewing, which I did do at home.
Turn the subtitles on.
Yeah, I want to see it on a third time. Yeah. And the actual
I guess the request I'll make then is let's just be explicit for our audience. Like I like those, like, hey, we're starting spoilers here kind of thing. So let's do that.
I'll pin the comment so we don't have to say that every time.
Gong here, gong.
Hashtag spoilers.
Yeah, I mean, no one's
at the
going to
beginning.
off. Just spoil.
So I'll stop being the prude about it. But anyway, so that scene there, what's so great about it is I realized later that it was sort of like a litmus test for me, because there was so much in it that was so weird in the book. But in a book, you get it and you go through it. But there was so much that I was so nervous about how it's going to translate to screen. It's going to work. And there, you can so clearly see the influences on the Jedi and the Force and how is it going to be done. And it was so well done and so visceral. The little like making the kid move and how that was done. The sound effects were insane, and it was really, really well done. And that breakdown,
that dolly zoom with the focus locked.
Yeah, and with the delayed voice where you see lips move, and then the sound is almost like waves that hit later, and then it's almost like a little mini coma. It's the way that it was done. I felt like saying, okay. All right, I'm in safe hands. The rest of it's gonna be pretty good too. So it was visually like one of the most, like I kind of felt like, oh, okay, I already know from the guy's previous work, this guy knows visuals. He's just like a Christopher Nolan for me. Like he's not random with his movements the way that there's this one director that bugs me. He's really famous, gets a lot of work. I think he even won an Oscar. The King's Speech guy, the Les Miserables guy, whatever, his name escapes me, but he's like an example of like someone who's very high profile that does good work, that wins awards, where the camera movements feel fucking random to me and don't serve like all this shit that Andy does. By the way, if you have ever an opportunity to go to a theme park with Andy, it's great because because this stuff, he applies it to the real world. And the first time I saw Rise of the Resistance was with him, and he was pointing out all of that. Hey, notice the tunnels are getting narrower to make you feel more claustrophobic. And I was like, so that's how it's done.
Yeah, there are a ton of subtleties. And I think, as I said, that's one of the reasons why I had to stop and sit down and watch. Like we were talking about the scene with the hand in the box. Before, leading up to that, they were walking through the dark and the little light started fall. It was like the house light was following him around.
They're called glow globes.
Glow globes. Okay. Yeah. That was following him around. And it kind of just gave me a feeling of like, wow, I'm not necessarily attached to him. Maybe I'm like a light following with him. I don't know, but I started rolling all this together in the visual storytelling that it was doing. It threw me off because I felt it was a bit, as I said, it's methodical, it's majestic, but it's muted. It's a little like it's understated, and you have to look at things. I don't know. Am I reading that correctly?
No, I think you've got it right. In fact, this is a great point for me to put in a couple of notes that I've been waiting for to quote my wife, because she's completely new to all of it, and into sci-fi as like an amateur, not like super deep into it. And so I asked her for like her impressions on it, and I was going into it basically worried that, like, not too worried, because I thought the trailer, the casting, the director, I thought we were in pretty good hands. I had a pretty good feeling that it was going to be as good as it was. But considering the source material, there's always a chance it was going to come out like Tenet, something where it's like so crammed deep and there's so many players and you don't get it and you like feel like you need to do homework to understand it. And she came out going, no, I understood almost all of it. Here's, I'm going to Andy's point about Jessica and it being about her relationship, etc. That was like her big question was, I don't understand the mom's motivations or her twin pulls. And I was like, that's fair. And in fact, this is something I wanted to throw to Donnie. I feel like part of what made the movie work is how much they left out. Like, it's not just cutting the book in half and going, we're only going to cover this much. They still left out a huge number of players and themes and stuff just to build this world. That was my feeling. Did you get that too?
Yeah, and it was tricky watching it with somebody or just watching it knowing everything that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because I found myself like anticipating things and knowing exactly what's going to happen and not really feeling the tension. And one of the scenes where that really sort of stuck with me was when she was gagged on the ornithopter.
Yeah.
Paul had to use a voice. I really want to know what that felt like as a person new to Dune.
Yeah.
What that was like to watch that. But there's going to be a lot of stuff in part 2.
Sure. Yeah.
Jessica has a lot of motivations. The biggest probably is love for Leto.
Yeah.
Which triggered everything, right?
Yeah.
He wanted a son. She was not supposed to have a son. She had a son anyway.
Yeah.
So,
I would say that's the part where I started feeling like, oh, I wonder if they cut too much just to, because there's already so much that people have to sort of get used to. The voids, the planets, and the trap, and the Freman.
Where's the Emperor?
Yeah.
Where's Fade?
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, this is another really interesting thing. I mean, kind of going back to bring these two thoughts together, right? But that scene with some of the most iconic lines of the book, this film and that film is, I will let fears the mind kill it, right?
Yeah.
If you remember anything from the David Lynch movie, you remember that scene and you remember that line of dialogue. And I thought it was so fascinating that they shifted it so the dialogue comes from Jessica.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that it's just him and he's just focused on, experiencing the pain of the box. And she's the one to actually kind of deliver that. And we're left to kind of experience her struggle and her pain and her being torn between her allegiances as mother and into the Bene Gesserit. I mean, that was just such another just really cool, brilliant way to, just incorporate character development into the storytelling and not go, now we're doing the world building and character development. And now we'll tell the story.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I would say that, like, I'm looking forward to part 2. I'm glad it's been so well received. Everyone's sort of initiated into this world, and is that it's this is how I'd explain it to people that don't know the books, about how weird it is to not to have that be a little ambiguous. What, like, my wife didn't even understand the woman that was testing Paul was from the same order as Jessica. Like, it's all and if you think that's not that important, imagine Star Wars, where the very first movie, they don't say the word Jedi. You don't understand.
You don't know who Ben is.
You don't know who Ben is. Like, you don't, like, so that's what it's like, because that order of women are like these Jedi of Dune, and their abilities are like the Force. It's that, and it's It's really
They're not as nice as the Jedi, though.
no, not at all. No, they're fucking evil. But but
Well, so there's another thread where someone was jokingly talking about uh
The worst interpretation. Dude.
well, yeah, like
Oh,
yeah,
no.
they were. It's like, well, what happened when a group of women decide to meddle in the affairs of the world? Well,
Yeah.
it turned into like the Bene Gesserit equal space Karens.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
Oh.
interesting because you know, that speaking of like them not being like good versions of the Jedi or whatever, or not being good at all, there wasn't, and this is what threw me off with the whole Dune thing initially, where I kind of had to like, wait a minute, I'm sitting here, but I'm not quite sitting right with this. What's going on? It was that it doesn't follow the normal Hollywood hero's journey standard structure. And I think I realized that, as I was saying in that glow ball scene, where we started to separate from Paul a little bit, and we started like, okay, he's not necessarily this classic hero type that we've grown to know and understand.
really,
Once I, once I, what do
you don't think he's like Neo in the Matrix, where he's like, there's a one and he's chosen and he's a reluctant hero and he.
Well,
I think the novel does, but they've broken it up in the movie quite a bit.
Okay.
because I don't know, to me, he started to feel as this, like when he first, how dare you use the voice on me? And
Yeah.
he comes in fully formed with a lot of these powers. There's not a lot of, downside to him. Like he needs to work through things. He's just kind
Oh,
of,
he's been trained since the birth. Yeah.
I mean, so a lot of this stuff is just kind of happening. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, for a Hollywood type of movie, this isn't traditional where you sit in a role of, I need to learn something. I don't understand. I'm growing bigger. It was just kind of like, no, this is all coming to me. This is what's going to happen. So I think I was able to separate and look at the story from a slightly more objective viewpoint, as opposed to going along for the standard Hollywood ride. I don't know. That was my view on it. But you were,
Yeah, Al and I were talking about that a little bit. I do think so Herbert wrote this before there was a lot of literature talking about the hero's journey.
Mhm.
But like that whole story is traditional. It goes back before books were even written.
Yeah.
And Al and I were talking about part of that is Paul himself sort of becomes aware that he's walking that path and he tries to get off of it.
Oh, not even sort of. Like in the book, you feel the author's voice more than any book
Yep.
I've ever read, where he's like,
That's-
oh my God, I'm on this path. And he sees all, and he's like, no, he tries to rebel against it. It's like the story picks him up no matter what. He's like, oh
Yeah.
my God, these people believe it already. I can't stop it. Like,
because to be
But
honest,
there's definitely like a rising action.
Mhm.
There's like the call to arms. There's a refusal.
Mhm.
There's the fight with a dragon. Right.
the
I mean,
trial by
dwarves are
fires. Right.
literally dragons.
Yeah.
There's a big scene in the second half where Paul drinks the water of life, which is a huge deal.
Mhm.
And there's sandworms all over the place. It's very, very dangerous. And then he becomes, triumphant, returns and defeats his enemies.
Oh wait, Donnie, I've got one for you. I'm sorry, I got one for you that's gonna go over everyone's head. Sorry, this one's just for you. Did you get any vibes from when he stares at the sandworm? Did you get any Shiana vibes at all?
Any what vibes?
Shiana?
I'm not sure. I don't know what that word is.
Ooh, okay.
It's an 80s rock group. No,
No. This might be after book 6, might be book 7.
Oh, I see. So later books. No, I didn't.
Yeah.
But there's a little thing that you can very easily miss. When they've landed and they're saving the harvester.
Yeah.
And he sort of falls into a trance a little bit, and he's kneeling in the sand just in front of the harvester. And he just utters under his breath, it's barely audible, I recognize your footsteps, old man. And then Gurney comes out of the sand, right?
Yeah.
He's not talking to Gurney.
Yeah.
He's talking to the sandworm.
Ooh, I did miss that. The old man in the sea.
The old man of the sand.
Old
Yep.
man. because the worms are like the whales of
Yep.
Dune. Oh yeah.
He is already having visions, and it's hinted a little bit. And I really like how Villeneuve played it very subtly.
Oh well.
There's this scene in the tent where he's sort of panicking.
That one really hit me. They're like,
Yeah.
I can't believe you did this to me. You made me a freak. It's not like, hey, I've got powers now. Right. It's like, yeah, that's done to me.
That angle and that side of the angle on Paul, the story on Paul,
that must have thrown people. Like expecting a hero's journey type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying, it was kind of like, this is kind of weird, but I get into it. There was the narrative that I understood from when I was a kid was that this is kind of another, even as a kid, I was kind of like, this is kind of a white savior thing.
Yeah.
Where, you have the, Iraqi, and, this planet, they need to be saved. So let's have a child. And there was hints of royalty going along and all that. And it's kind of like, okay, I'm not mad at it, but it wasn't terribly interesting. And I think when I started like, oh, this is not what I'm thinking it is, that's when I started to kind of latch onto it a little more. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Andy, what did you think of that final fight?
You mean just the choreography?
Yeah.
I mean, I liked how simple it was. I mean, I would say in terms of fight choreography, it is very cool to see Filipino martial arts like all over this, right? And it's
the details because the guy the Nigerian, I forget the actor's name right now. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
Who's the choreographer?
I don't know the choreographer, but the actor himself, the one playing Janet.
Oh. Yeah, got it.
Belt. And he oh shit, did I lose you guys?
Oh.
Oops.
I mean, it's I mean, for me, I mean, it's like, right. You have this conceit of everyone has these personal shields. It makes projectile weapons, kind of useless because anything has to be, which means all combat has to be personal. It has to be this knife fighting, right?
Yeah.
And so instead of going for kind of that European, like, dagger and saber thing, going for this very Filipino martial arts style, close corner kind of, where it's all quick cuts and, it's all kind of cutting and screaming.
Okay, so wasn't that kind of deflated a bit by like the weapons that spin, the little spinning dart deals that they were shooting at people? I felt there were a couple elements that kind of didn't make sense to me that they just kind of threw in.
Which one was the spinning dart thing?
Any of the projectiles that hit the shields and slowly burrowed through.
It closed it enough to the point where if you notice, Duncan Idaho flicked one off. So it's close enough that he can. And another thing, by the way, I love the shields because it gives like a realistic reason for why, they have to use hand-to-hand combat and sort of bring back the old ways and treasure them again and learn them better.
What do you think the point of that was?
I think the point of that was, I think partly it's a commentary on atomics, as he calls it in the book, to show that they're basically it's like nuclear containment or deterrence is the only way in order for society to survive. Because like, if you think about when it was written, like there was a lot of like, post-apocalyptic zombie movies, space invaders. Like it was hard to imagine life after like a nuclear winter and scorched earth, right? In the book, it makes very, very clear, nope, you can't have nuclear weapons because of these shield things, because any kind of laser hits it, it's basically the same as atomic. All these great houses all have like essentially a peace treaty not to use nuclear weapons for a reason, because then you wouldn't have any of the trade. And there's so many subtle things about the book. There's so many subtle things about the book. And one of the things that's so subtle is that it took one of the tropes, like AI, like sentience and becoming aware and all that, and buried it in the past, like thousands of years before the action. It's something that's, it sort of avoids a lot of the tropes.
Okay. Go ahead, Donnie.
If that makes sense.
I'm just geeking out on stuff like the scene where Duncan's fleeing in the ornithopter. and the
Yeah.
Spider Car decided to use a laser gun on him. That was extremely dangerous and illegal. If they had hit him and it had gone off and blown up, the pact among the worlds would have triggered annihilation of probably
Of that entire house, that entire line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how serious the atomic agreement is in the setting.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I'll say at least this too. The other thing is that just the pure mechanics of I shoot you from 50 yards away with a gun and then I move on versus I have to look you in the eye and stab you.
Yeah.
Right. Like that already, whether it's how you envision it in a novel or how you see it dynamically on screen, it makes death personal. Right. And particularly,
that sort of ties back to the Butlerian Jihad where they got rid of thinking machines too.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So,
I actually recently learned about that whole idea of, that's something that I was not aware about, that, AI is outlawed in this universe. I picked that up a couple days ago, but, which makes sense. But also, yeah, I mean, just in terms of, oh shoot, what was I going to say? I lost my thought. Damn it.
The personal nature of the combat.
yeah.
Yes.
And
You have to look them in the eye.
death is up close.
Oh, yes. So that the birth of Paul as Muad'Dib, we basically see at the end of this movie the first time he takes a life,
Yeah.
right? And it becomes a person like, here's the person I think is supposed to be my mentor, who I'm going to learn things about the desert from. And this is the lesson. The lesson is to kill this man.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To take.
I think there were a lot of things like that were laying the ground. Like either you knew the books thoroughly and you were excited by these little Easter eggs, or you didn't. And then later you'll see it's laid the groundwork for it. Like my wife after didn't really even understand that he was seeing the future because it was so convoluted and so done in
Possible futures.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he had this whole conversation with that guy about the flow of processings and what does that mean? So it's kind of good in that it's question marks that hopefully will pay off later for a lot of people and for the rest of us we get to geek out now because I like that they're Easter eggs instead of like I came out of the movie instead of elated that it was so great, which I was. I felt more overwhelming sense of relief. Like, oh, they did it right. Yeah, it felt like a shot by shot remake of the '84 Dune, and I was like, I'm fine with that. Just could clear out all the cheesy fucking narrations and the pondering like type and everything.
I'm not about the whole movie, but that specific
It's included in conversations.
Yeah.
But like all of that it's still narration. It's still, just the simple choice of prefacing these flashbacks, in a conversation with someone. And suddenly it feels like a character moment as much as it is exposition.
Yeah. It definitely felt like there was, like, I think part of like going back to the very first question Benji asked is why this book and this whole world has stood the test of time is one of the same things that makes it so hard to be approachable. It doesn't have robots and computers, etc. Well, the flip side is that if you do put in that investment, you get these themes that are much more like they stand the test of time. They go to deeper human issues. And that's how I felt about the movie, the '84 movie. It felt like when I went back, it had a lot of '80s in it. And I'm like, it doesn't have to have all this shit. Like, I like that shit, man. I went back. Check this out. I really mentioned it. If you go back, I like the '84 better. Yeah. If you go back and like, for example, watch Superman 2, or something where like Lois is falling in love and she literally sings him a song and he touches her fingertip and makes her fly. I'm like, we forget that shit because it's fucking corny '80s shit. That's what it is. Oh, I remember that. I dramatically blocked it out until recently. So I kind of felt like it was like the '84 version. Actually, the bones of it, a lot of it, were still in this movie, and it's been stylistically updated.
Yeah, I think as far as like the political intrigue and the battling back and forth, I think when I went back and watched the '84 version, I actually felt that a little more in that one. There's a little more overt with like Yeah. You know,
The Emperor's there,
yeah, the Emperor,
maneuvering things.
the Space Guild guys are floating in. They're like, "Hey, we're trying to do this deal, and what's going on?" And
Oh, did you see them in this one?
They're in the very beginning. The guys with the
orange masks.
that was them. Okay.
Yeah.
those are the guild
I
representatives.
just went back and rewatched the David Lynch shit. I've been wanting to actually. But
I'll finish that second half.
I feel like I feel like watching this makes me understand like iconic things and I remember. Okay, right? You know,
I will say, like, I do remember the 84 version as a kid, the way Andy described it. Like, it was so different. It was completely over my head. I was like 8 at the time, but there were visuals and things that you'd never seen anywhere elsewhere. And it just kind of, when I was reading the book, I got some of those vibes too. But yeah, the book, we should say for those that don't know, the 84 movie did essentially the entire book. And it tried to cram in all of the political intrigue and machinations. And that's what we call it, you sort of Star Wars for adults. But when you get into the books, there's this whole other part, which is like Game of Thrones in space, the different houses and alliances and economies and external enemies, binding them together, or it should, but some don't anyway, and all of that stuff. And so you can see why they greenlit series in addition to making these 2 movies.
Right. And behind it all is the Bene Gesserit, which is going to be the series.
Exactly.
So-
Which means we should talk about the women of this world.
so with the before we jump into the women, now, screw it. Let's go ahead and do it right now since we're there. No, I'm like bouncing around my notes here, and I'm just trying to. All right.
No, I won't forget this part. We can go on to whatever you had next.
No, so the women in this, in the 84 version, it starts out with a lady, I forgot her name. But she,
The Reverend Mother.
was that it? I'm not sure who it was in the movie.
Did she have hair or not?
She had hair. It wasn't veiled.
There's Lady Jessica.
They gave her a name, and somebody was explaining it.
Oh, you mean Princess Irulan?
Oh,
yeah,
the princess. Yeah.
Yeah.
The narrator.
So yeah, she narrates the beginning and sets
That's right.
sets the tone for it. So in that movie, I got a bit of a sense of the niceness that they're trying to put forth, and I didn't see as much of the underlying machinations that were going on. And I don't know what this world was trying to put forth with gender, but they're obviously a very strong group of women, in particular with this one group. And I don't know if that's ever really explored in any other facet of the story. Right there.
You mean outside of this film, like in other media, like
Outside of the Bene Gesserit.
Oh, outside of the Bene Gesserit, yeah, women play a huge role, and to the point where, so I'll just step back and say, that's one of the minor controversies that flared up on the way towards this movie being released is that some of the actors mentioned how the gender roles had been updated a little bit and that they were a little bit traditional in the books, and some people got angry and said you're being revisionist, is it sexist or not, etc. Well, so I'll say when I watched it that they didn't change that much. They did do a gender swap on one of the main characters, but in a way that worked for me because it shows the sort of like warrior spirit of like everyone in this world. But essentially, the book is like a love letter to the author's wife. The author and him are and his wife were both writers, and they both took turns supporting each other financially, like to live their dreams and both become writers. And the main character, Lady Jessica, is modeled on Frank Herbert's wife. And as the books go on, women in general, but that race of women become more and more important to the point where they basically rule the galaxy. And all is not well. It doesn't mean like, oh, when women rule the world, everything's better. But the characteristics of grace and emotional truth seeking and groundedness and strength and all this other stuff was modeled really heavily on Frank Herbert's wife. In the last 10 years of his life, he was just taking care of her as she died from cancer. And that's why it took so much out of him. And he died like 2 years after she died. And that's why the last book wasn't like written. He took forever to basically write the last book that he did write. and didn't get to the ending. By the way, I just realized the reference I was making to Donnie about Shiana, those are in the Sons books. 10 years after the author died, he went back to sort of conclude that thing, saying he's finally ready. He built up his own sci-fi writing chops by writing prequels and the sisterhood stuff that's going to come to HBO. He's an executive producer on this movie, by the way. And so 10 years after he said, I'm finally going to do it, went to the publishers and they dug through and they found 2 hidden safe deposit boxes with all of his father's notes about how it was supposed to end. And so he wrote 2 more books to wrap up this. Essentially, that this is like the Skywalker saga, the main family. And I just realized Shan as a character in that. I'm glad I didn't give away any spoilers. So, but that shot of Paul standing in front of the sandworm, where the sandworm's framed in a way where it almost looks like an eye, like it's looking at him and they're contemplating each other. There's no way that's not an Easter egg for some of the later books and other cool stuff that comes later. But yeah, so women do have a strange role in this, in that they are powerful. However, when like I said, my wife was confused about who is Jessica, what's her motivation with their son, who the hell was that old lady, what? And I tried to explain what the Bene Gesserit is. She said she was shocked. She was like, "Oh, I didn't get any of that from the movie. That sounds like some Handmaid's Tale type twisted shit." And and that's where they don't use the word concubine even once. My wife started picking up on some weirdness when he said, "I should have married you." And she's like, "That's not his wife." Like, she was confused by that whole angle, and they did sort of smooth some of those things over to get into the movie, because that I could see how it would be problematic.
She wasn't walking by his side when they came off the ship. She was walking behind him.
But that's subtle enough that it's not as explicit.
It could be missed.
It's a book where, like in the book, another version of the Force that the nuns use is sex. Like they enslave men by like basically using the Kama Sutra on them and to like warp their minds and shit. It's like, like you can see how that's like
it gets weird.
It gets weird, but like I loved it all.
Interesting, weird. Like the setting has some weird, interesting stuff, and I feel this movie sort of captured some of that sort of skin crawling weirdness in some of the scenes. Like the voice, I thought was pretty disturbing. How it just sort of instantly put Paul into that narcoleptic coma.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, what's going on? Like and you think about, like, you learn what the Bene Gesserit are. They have unlocked the biological memory of all their ancestors, and they sort of manifest this hyper hypnosis with the knowledge of all those experts that they're able to communicate within themselves. And then they use it on people, with the voice and with the sex. And there's a lot of little creepy things, like the worm was creepy as hell, I thought, like terrifying.
Yeah.
The way it liquefied the sand.
Yeah.
And those were practical effects.
Oh, okay.
And
I could see how they might have used sound speakers below the sand to make it dance in certain patterns and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, it was all those little creepy things I thought were really a great addition.
Yeah, I think they really. You know what that or?
Yeah. Sorry.
So no, I think a lot of those creepy additions, the methodology behind putting all that together is where I think this really shines. And it's funny. As I said, I saw it I saw it small twice. So I watched it, then I watched the 84 version, then I watched it again. And now I'm sitting up here thinking, well, gee, I should go watch it in the theater now to catch even more. Andy, you spoke in our little pre-discussion about hitting on notes of philosophy. What did you get from the movie that was talking to you about some of the philosophical elements?
Gosh, what was I having on?
It's kind of like said philosophy,
the big obvious
politics,
the big obvious.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the kind of the power of demagoguery, and well, actually, I mean, I really found the post that you posted internally to the rest of us really fascinating, right? Of the Herbert quote about the danger of heroes, or specifically the danger of superheroes. That anyone who is, um, um, you know, has the power of a superhero, even if they have good intent, the systems they create, therefore, create the potential for, they're still human beings with flaws, and the impact of their flaws or their mistakes are now on a gigantic scale.
Yeah,
Um,
I have the actual quote here. I'll go ahead and throw it down. Not the whole
Yeah.
thing. They were asked. He was asked about how it evolved, how the story came through, and in explaining, he says, "This grows from my theory that superheroes are disastrous for humankind. Even if we find a real hero, whoever or whatever that may be, eventually fallible mortals take over the power structure that always comes into being around such a leader." And speaking of a story from a hero point of view, that really stuck with me as like bringing in the ideas of religion and, what's the power there? The power to control people, the power to decide where resources go, um, getting behind a certain figure, whether it's a Messiah figure, whether you're building the Messiah, as the, Bene Gesserit trying to do, or whether you're waiting on a Messiah, as the people from the Sand are doing. Slipped my mind what their name is.
Freman.
Freeman, of course. Yeah. So there's all this politics, religion, kind of thing going together, and that's exactly what I was trying to get at when I was saying the philosophy and stuff you were talking about. It seemed like you were hinting at that too. That's what struck you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, yeah, it's, well, in terms of, the opportunity to create a safe space where you create a distant space where you can talk about kind of those larger ideas, which I think this absolutely does, right? And from what I understand of where the story goes after here, right? I mean, I do think that there is an intentional choice in terms of after the fears, after the box scene, right?
Mhm.
Is that, yeah, I mean, I do feel like there's an intentional choice to turn the story from being from Paul's perspective to watching Paul from Jessica's perspective, because now you know, he is stripped of everything. Um, his father is gone, and he is placed with the tasked choice to kind of wield this power that has been laid before him, right? Um, um, all these various powers, and what he does with this is, what the next movie will be.
Yeah, this movie was very much, it seems like, about their relationship, a mother-son relationship, and what does it mean to become your own person, and your parents' plans for you, and et cetera, and how that comes into conflict in defining your own self. I mean, at the very end, it comes down to he makes a choice that his mother disagrees with. He goes off to the Freeman and says, "This is how what I believe my dad would have wanted, to create the desert power," and his mother did it. So that's the first beyond emotional, but like logistical crack in their relationship, or split, I should say, his growth into choosing his own actions.
Well, I mean, talk about thinly veiled allegory too, right? Like, let alone Arrakis to Iraq or whatever, but like freaking that, where he's gonna build his army of completely devout, like, soldiers are the Fremen,
Yeah,
the Freemen,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, who are questionable whether how free they are if they buy into this idea of a Messiah figure.
I'm gonna,
Like, that's fascinating right there.
I'm gonna leave you, Mom. I'm gonna go hang out with my new friends and smoke drugs, and yeah, it's gonna be great.
We're all going to be men, and we're going to be free, and we're going to call ourselves the free men.
And we do.
So
It's not quite as bad as like Unobtainium, but like or in the last Dune movie, last Bond movie, there's a guy, that Bond villain is basically named Lucifer Satan. I think it's not. I think it's actually like Lucius Satan or something. But it's like, oh, okay, all right, it's a little. It's a little on the nose, but like instead of spice, if they called it schmoil or something, you know, that. But
Why is it called spice?
Because it's used in food and it's ingested.
And it's always described as basically cinnamony. It's like
Yeah.
super cinnamon. And if you think
Yeah.
about it, like I don't know, like so I'm Turkish, but like I was raised here, and so like a lot of spicy home cooked foods had a lot of weird red shit in it, like paprika, like everywhere.
Yeah.
Yes. So
And
it felt very Middle Eastern. Yeah.
there are wars fought over the spice trade. Also.
Yeah. People forget like some of the stuff, like basic commodities that we have. Like the reason our the word for salary is what it is it comes from salt. Like the phrase "the man is worth his weight," like you would be paid in salt, like salt, and there's a reason because we have it so much in our modern society. We try to cut down off blood pressure, but if you go back enough centuries, salt is critical. There's a reason why tribes all around the world drink blood. Like saline is something that's very difficult to find in nature that like you can't run on. And so it does have this sort of elemental mining operation type feel to it with spice.
It was so important. It picked up mythological properties, right?
Yeah.
Like the pillar of salt.
Yeah.
It was used to purify things. So it became a alchemical ingredient.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how those myths developed over time, which sort of ties back to what I was going to try to bring up a second ago. I'll put it in quotes, the religions that the Fremen believe in are not their own. They weren't organically arrived upon by those people. It was hinted at a little bit, but they were literally planted. The ideas of those myths, they were planted there by the Bene Gesserit hundreds and hundreds of years ago, specifically in the case that a sister found herself stuck there. She could manipulate the people to ensure her survival and her whatever mission she had would be successful. Now that it goes very, very deep.
They have
the chant.
To it in the movie. They have a little.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, where the son goes like you just tell them what to believe and whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
But the chanting that the Fremen were doing at the palace, that's all Bene Gesserit planted. The Lisan al-Gaib, I think I said that right. Bene Gesserit planted. The everything that they're about to explore in the second movie was planted by the Bene Gesserit. Now, Paul finds himself in this situation where he's either going to turn away or not. And if he turns away, these wheels have already begun rolling.
Yeah.
And he has to decide, like the entire next movie is going to be him making decisions and struggling with those decisions and hallucinating constantly about those decisions. But the thing I find interesting is his feelings for these people are real and legitimate. And he grows very close to Stilgar and Chani and has family with them because they adopted him. And he became one of them literally through taking the life of Jamis.
Yeah.
Like once he's done that, there's nothing else. Like there's no initiation or anything. He is a Fremen now.
Yeah.
And I think they say that in the movie. So it's a weird like battle between this sort of evil, manipulative, charismatic hero that we're being warned about. But at the same time, he's, there's that powerful story of he's avenging his father's death. He's righting the wrongs of the evil Harkonnen. He's destroying this artificial scarcity economy by taking control of it, seizing it for himself. And you're like, yeah, that sounds great. But then like you see what happens after and it's not good at all. It's a really compelling and interesting story as you watch him struggle with decisions I don't think anybody would want to struggle with.
I think it's an artificial scarcity of spice.
Yeah. Well, it's all over the sand. I mean, there's a danger in collecting it, but the Emperor controls the flow and the Harkonnens control it. They've been harvesting it like mad and have a huge surplus of it. And they've controlled the spice market, just like the West India Company. I think that's the name. East India Company controlled
or even the
flow of trades.
diamond companies do now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a big part of the book. But so that
And I don't think that there's a scarcity of oil. I think that the oil companies probably control the flow of that.
Yeah.
To manipulate the price.
God, what's it called? The OPEC. Yeah, like the OPEC consortiums.
Yeah.
There's actual consortium in the books as well too. Chum.
Yep. Chum and the land strat.
And that's the equivalent of OPEC and the oil nations bond together.
Oh,
but there's a very like the Star Wars for adult aspect is that like that's one big area of religion is different. Like in Star Wars, you're asked to drop your rational beliefs and to just believe in this sort of higher power, and then good abilities will happen to you. In the books, it is very, very hard nosed. Like what Donnie says is very deliberate. They plant religions around different cultures around the world specifically for control, and they're very open about it. The Bene Gesserit, their main drive is called Missionaria Protectiva. It's the mission to protect the humanity via controlling for their benefit, right? And that's a big, controlling to the people
for their greater good.
Exactly. And that's something that's it's something that you could see being written in the 50s and 60s and developed further, and being very much for adults, right? Not for kids. Like, hey, religion is just another social construct, kids, etc. But I think that also gets to, I think people were able to swallow that, but I think the reason the books that come after, I always thought Dune was just one book. It blew my mind when I found out that it was like 6 by the dad and a whole bunch of others, is because like, here's a tip, by the way. If you guys get into reading the books, ignore the introductions until after you've read them, because the son goes nuts about spoilers. But if they're actually really cool stuff to read after you've read each book, because he gets into the sort of genesis of how that book was written and why. And that's where I got the sort of, I got his take on how the dad had always intended for Paul not to just question the hero's journey, but then in the later books to actively subvert it into not just, in the Dune book, it goes deeper on these sort of possible futures he sees of things that could go wrong or right or whatever. And then in later books, it's like, no, it goes fucking wrong and sideways. And then I don't think people like having their heroes turn into villains or question their own movements that they've spawned and that kind of thing. And so it gets even deeper as the books go along as well.
So another thing that stuck out to me is when Paul's father was talking about, hey, here on our home planet, we have air power and water power. Now we can get into desert power. I didn't know that air and water were useful like spice was. I don't know what he was getting at or why that stuck out.
No, it was a military advantage.
Yeah, I read that as the same thing. Like, we have a Navy, we have an Air Force.
Yeah.
Now we have a desert force.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Which actually was a big thing in World War II as well, too, right? Like North Africa was like one of the giant stages for and turning points, or go further back, Ottoman Empire and Byzantine Empire and all those flips. Like the desert has been. So here's one of the things about religion where that I just don't think it'll come across in movies, and that's fine. This is totally extra. But one of the interesting things about the appendices that he wrote, which are almost like books by themselves, like these things at the back of the first book, is that he had this insight that 3 of the major religions of our world were created in deserts. And that maybe there was something about these things were not created despite the harsh environments, but you almost needed harsh environments to create the type of people that would be superior warriors and religious fanatics and et cetera, et cetera. It's not an accident.
Well, wait, what religions was he referring to as being
Judaism,
the Abrahamic,
and all the Abrahamic monotheistic religions. So if those 3 essentially all have like deep roots in deserts and, the 40 days lost in the desert or the trials by fire in the desert and those kinds of things, that what if the Fremen were basically a superior type of people both as warriors and as like strong belief systems and ability to survive it because of the desert, not despite it. And
I would actually, kind of build off of that idea in terms of those, if we're talking about those three specific religions, and how those religions were used basically as catalysts for conquering in ways over other religions, right? That's really why those religions are the most prevalent, is because they were used as tools for like mobilizing armies.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That
But if
brings us.
you think of like, okay, Christianity's origins at its time, right? The Roman Empire, where the Roman Empire was trying to basically stamp out these like insurgents, right? And then it became this sort of, if you can't beat them, join them kind of thing, where the small movement then became part of the Roman Empire, and you had a Christian emperor and et cetera. There's equivalents in the book as well, too, commentary of like Paul's movement with the Freemen become like this stubborn group of people that cannot be stamped out, that eventually grow and grow, and then that's where the commentary about the oppressed becoming the oppressors. Are they any better, or are they even 10 times worse, et cetera? Like all that sort of like Palestinian Israel conflict writ large kind of type stuff happens as well too. So there's little hints of it here, but here it's much more. But in the book, and in the recent movie, it's much more about watching these two giant empires clash, and there's just people are sort of caught in the middle.
One thing that I think is sort of touched a little bit in the movie, but sort of talked about more in the books, is the perception of the Fremen as sort of primitive savages, when the truth is they're not, and they have a rich culture of their own, which is, unfortunately, it's manipulated quite a bit by the Bene Gesserit in the past, but they do have their own culture where like water is the commodity of highest value. Yeah, and the spitting, that's a good example. Like they have this rich culture, they have an enormously successful and advanced industrial base. You just don't see it. Like they manufacture still suits, which is a cutting edge technology, right? They make the compass, the paracompass thing that Paul uses. They made that really cool sand sculpture tool that used sonic stuff. And the Arconans are sort of guilty of this in the movie. They think that there's only like 50,000, and the Baron says, "Go crush them. It's my planet. It's my Dune. They're of no consequence." I'm completely dismissing them because my perception of them is they're worthless savages. And we learn with Paul in the next book that they're anything but, right? There's this huge, enormous, rich society. And I think that's sort of another interesting takeaway that is that a lot of people can be guilty of a perception of the other group as savage and primitive and not worthy. And it's another thing that Herbert's really good at in this book is highlighting that prone that nature that we're all prone to, and it stands large in this book and movie.
That was a theme that I was not ready for, and really just found really striking, of when they're kind of going through the tunnels with the professor, right? And
With Liad?
revealed that with that all of this was created for terraforming the desert, and that ultimately they decided to not and ultimately keep things primitive, right? And to better exploit, the farming of spice, the collection of spice.
Well, a little bit of spoilers, but they don't really talk about it in the movie. Liad actually wants to make Arrakis better for the Fremen. Part of that is introducing viable fauna, because their life is miserable and hard.
Yeah.
They're literally scraping by. They do have
That's the aspect
a society.
glorified too much, like the way the app.
Yeah.
the Aborigines are described in Australia as like masters of the desert. That no, they were pushed out from their productive regions of coastal areas, and that's why they're in the bushes, they call it there. The Fremen are similarly sort of banished into these unproductive areas, hanging on by their nails.
Yeah, and that character is trying to reverse that, right? But that poses a threat, right?
Yeah.
Reducing the flow of spice is going to really anger the emperor. Plus, like, spice is legitimately improving the lives of everybody in the universe. They don't talk about it, but it improves health, it extends life, and it it probably has elevated the quality of life for everybody. So it's another weird trade-off that, I don't know. It's interesting to think about, and I wouldn't want to decide the outcome.
I don't remember if I got this factoid from you, Al, or from something I saw on YouTube or something like that. But talking about America's obsession with coffee in the night.
Oh, that's me.
So
Yeah, that was
that you?
yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, well, I mean, I find that really just fascinating too, right? In how that's the correlation, right? For the idea of spice as a stimulant and driver of capitalism and weakening the economy.
Yeah, the author behind that, if for those that are interested more, I highly recommend it. It's Michael Pollan. He's written a lot of stuff that have become really big, like the eat plants, not too much guy, that kind of thing. And his recent thing, he makes a really strong case for how coffee basically built the Industrial Revolution. And it's like a focusing drug, and that for century it's relatively new in terms of the substances that we consume in mass. Like, it's only a few centuries old. It's something we take for granted, but it's like the most widely consumed psychoactive substance on the planet. Like 90% of us take in caffeine of some form or another. And it's a massive improvement over what we drank for thousands of years before that. Beer, wine, that kind of stuff. There's a and so
I loved how they had the coffee setting, that they were about to have a coffee serving in the movie right there. That was so cool.
Oh yeah, where they were like,
as a Dune fan,
and
they're all spitting into it to add their water.
And
it was gross, but it was cool.
It was really cool. But getting back to some of the ecological points you mentioned, there are little call outs to ecology. Might be a bridge too far for a 2-hour movie. I get it, but it is such an important part of the book that, like, for example, the mouse there, that's a big part of it. I mean, it'll be even more important later. There's a reason why it's called Maudit. Like, they do a close up of the ears where it's a wind trap and it captures moisture and comes down to its face. Like, those types of animals were all introduced over decades by that scientist, the ecologist, and her father. Like, they're not terraforming in a Blade Runner, give it 2 years with the colonists in a giant machine kind of way. They're doing it by like planting shit over decades.
Yeah.
And the original,
they're pursuing sustainability too.
Yeah. So the original book actually didn't become popular overnight. And where it first started becoming this underground cult hit was in the Whole Earth catalog and this hippie movement.
Right.
Hey, here's this whole sci-fi movement about the environment, man, and what happens when it's destroyed, and like how indigenous people know better and their ancient rituals need to be brought back, man. And like, it was true. All that's true. And more. There's a lot more. But
Herbert was definitely a environmentalist. He talked about I don't know if he was pro-environment necessarily, but he talked a lot about it. So it was definitely injected into the stories of Dune. And that's apparent from the books and from the movie a little bit. Yeah. But one thing that I was wondering about, and Flo Corny asked, what do you say to the white savior trope? We talked about this a little bit before, but I think with our discussion, as we've been building on this, it's the hero thing. And there's this bit of, there is no one that's really good. We're just describing a situation and a story. And it's a very artistic piece like that. So I don't know if you guys thought there was a good point of view, or is this just a tale about, how?
I mean, I think if you only look at this part one, right? Then yeah, it's going to feel very familiar, right? But kind of some of the things that you're talking about Benja, and how, and then also Alan, or the things you guys were talking about in terms of how Herbert kind of sought out to break the hero's journey structure, right? Like it will not, over the course of the whole story, it will not fit that hero mold. And
he does not save the Fremen people at all.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It will,
And the
will
Fremen
ultimately
people
break
aren't
the
good.
white savior ness of itself, right?
But
Yeah.
Andy,
They don't need to be saved.
Andy, was it you a couple
Right.
weeks ago that made the joke where you said you saw the trailer and you're like, is this just Dances with Wolves in space? I mean, he does go native and he does sort of like switch sides and he does come back to sort of fight. And there's a fight scene. Where he's with
Well, check this out.
I mean, I think I use that analogy to talk about Avatar.
oh,
Dennis with Panther.
yeah. Okay.
I thought Avatar was Fangoli in space. That's what I thought it was.
Everything's in space. Interesting that they didn't use a lot of in space action. They just jumped to planets, kept it pretty terrestrial. So,
yeah.
So we can talk about that real briefly. So there's nothing interesting really happening in space in the setting. And space is very, very big and distances are enormous. And only the guild navigators, which we don't see, can fly through space because there's no computers. Somebody high on the spice needs to steer the ship.
Yeah.
And that's the guild navigators. And they like aerosol the stuff and they live in these tanks and that's all they breathe. So they're constantly under this trance. So there's not a whole lot going on in space. There's sort of orbital bombardments are always a threat. But other than that, everything important is on the ground with people.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that's a big part of keeping it grounded in this sort of like I not to open a can of worms, but like that's what I liked about the recent Star Wars trilogies is that it felt like going back to the 70s in that aesthetic, in that, you know, proper locations, even when it's not, it feels that way. That's been sort of like a style of recent CGI, and it's as opposed to sort of the prequel-y, oh, this whole movie was in a grain world. That's my feeling about Avatar. Okay, great.
We should talk about all the practical sets. There were no green screens.
Oh my God, they bugged.
Maybe that's enough.
Before we jump on that, welcome back, Andy. And yes, I caught your pun, and the only reason I said, you know, can of worms, the only reason I stayed with it for that long was because you used can of worms.
And shame on you.
Like, it's a good little pun there, can of worms.
Yeah.
The idea that you know, so much of this movie was intentional. I really thought that, like, okay, so you know, they killed off a lot of the actors of color were killed off like right off the bat, and I'm thinking, okay, why would you do that in this day and age? And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute,
If you're not a campy horror movie, why would you do that?
And then I'm watching it again, and I'm like, oh wait, that could be in the spirit of Dune, and this whole thing is still pretty interesting to me. I don't know. Did any of you key on that at all?
Yeah. Unfortunately,
I was worried about how it would be received, especially the fight with Jamis.
yeah, that worked, especially for me, especially because fuck, he's a good actor. Like, there's a lot of roles where you're like, oh, why isn't he in Javier Bardem's role? Like, he's like this. Like, his tone of voice, I should admit, by the way, that actor, even though it's escaping my name, he recently came on my radar in that Guy Ritchie movie with the bank heist and stuff. He's got this smooth, under your skin voice and presence. Like, he could have been just as good as Stilgar as Bardem. So that aspect does bother me, because then it takes me out of the movie. I'm like, okay, great. Now you're window dressing, where you show that the Fremen are diverse, and then someone speaks up, and it's always either white or Hispanic, and that throws me off. I've been worrying about that ever since they cast the lead, who, as much as I liked, you know, he's like, his name might as well be like Pretty White Boy 101 or whatever. Like, you know, that is absolutely a problematic part of it.
He's my favorite young actor after that Kam Jabbar scene. So
yeah, and it was interesting to me that I don't know. As I said, after I watched it a couple times, I was like, wait a minute, might have been maybe not purely intentional, but it happened and they kind of left it in because it didn't upset the spirit of the books. I don't know. As Brian says, a whole room of Harkonnens were killed as well.
Yeah. Then all the Sardaukar looked like they were all white to me.
Yeah. The
So
it's
a weird.
We're keying into it because of today's society, So
Yeah.
this is something you'd have to be like thinking about. And when I watched the 1984 movie, what was interesting is, there were every cast was pretty diverse. So the Fremen had a lot of, very fair skinned people. You had dark skinned people in the other classes of, or the other guilds. So it was weird seeing this back and forth. I'm not sure exactly what was going on in the writer's room and what they thought about, but points. I don't know.
Yeah, that definitely stood out to me too. And the last fight in particular, like I said, he's been on my radar for a while. I'm like, why is that guy Stilgar? He'd make a great Stilgar. But anyway.
Yeah.
So Arlodo has answered a lot of these types of questions, specifically the white savior trope. So I think if people are really interested in that, it's available on the internet.
Oh, which one is that?
Too. He's specifically answered is Dune a white savior trope, and he's talked about it, and it's tricky because you can't really answer that without spoiling the rest of the story. But I feel, I don't know, it's up to everybody to decide, but I feel like he answered it fairly reasonably.
Yeah, and I do think that even in the given scope of the movie that was put out there, upon further watching, I think that is an oversimplification. And when people say the white savior trope, they're asking, are we kind of glorifying this white savior coming in and just doing whatever? And to that, I'd have to say, no, this doesn't do that. It still may receive some critique or whatever, but it's not as simple as just saying this guy comes.
I mean, and particularly when it ultimately it becomes a deconstruction of the workings of imperialism.
Yeah,
as a construct entirely.
Right. And you would want to say that in such a deconstruction, or at least reference it at least. So
yeah, I would say it does have a white savior problem, but that
it's on purpose. Like the Bene Gesserit set it up.
Yeah, I see, but it's sort of like multiple things are true. Like it is part of a larger context. It is made to be subverted later. In this first movie, it definitely isn't. It's both made to be subverted, both by the author, but also literally in universe by the Bene Gesserit tapping the tropes. But if I just take all that out of it, it's almost like there's so much weird new shit in this movie that they had to, bring into and introduce to a whole new world. And the white savior complex is the part of the plot that the book goes with to sort of as a framework to hang off of. It's like, it's not a trippy, Hunter S. Thompson type fucking narrative or a Tarantino chopped up narrative. It's almost like there's enough weird shit in this universe that it did kind of pick a very sort of traditional plot to go forward.
Right. But we've called it recently we've called it a complex, a trope, and a problem. All three of those are different descriptions. And it's a way of telling a story. And as I said, I didn't see it. I saw it as a problem kind of before I went into it, try to clear your mind, but kind of know what's going on. It's like, okay, this could be a problem. But then as I watched it, I'm like, oh no, it's just presenting something. And the fact that I really didn't like the main character, I didn't think that he was very likable, Paul. They didn't take a lot of motion to really say, hey, here's why we should like this guy. Hey, he's going to save a cat in a tree. There weren't any these save the cat moments for those of you who know what I'm referencing there.
His value is his relationship with his family, right? That's how he's built up.
Mm-hmm. He does.
He's sort of a blank slate.
He does have a little bit of a Luke Skywalker problem. But as opposed to Star Wars, I think sometimes
what do you mean by that? When you say Luke Skywalker problem, what type of problem are we talking about? Let's clarify.
Luke is the least interesting character of the original, sort of and a lot of heroes have this. like the hero.
That's on purpose, though, right?
That's what I'm trying to say. Like, it's
We
not,
put ourselves in that place.
it's not like a bad actor. It's not a this and that. It's sort of like like in a comedy deal, the straight man and then the wild one, right? Like his role is very vanilla, right? And that everyone else around him gets to be interesting. And
And actors complain about that, right?
yeah,
When
absolutely,
they get the lead roles,
yeah.
they want the juicy Han Solo part where they get to ham it up.
Yeah, or like Seinfeld
So
said in his series, like he was the most boring out of everyone there because he said, I want to reflect the state of comedians' real life, which is in real life, they're the quiet ones observing all the weird shit around them. And then they get them on stage and they, repackage it for everyone. And so in Seinfeld's Jerry's character was the most boring. Everyone around him was this colorful cast of characters. And so there is a little bit of that problem there with him, or that aspect there with him. But I think sometimes I wouldn't, even though they're different problem, framework, trope, whatever, they can all be valid at the same time. And for me, I think that I sort of like see it, but I don't get hung up on it because for example, it goes beyond Star Wars in showing that, like, Stilgar, when he first meets Leto, Paul's father, says, like, what do I care? Which essentially says, what do I care if you're a Harkonnen or you're whatever? You're all here to exploit us. I don't care who's here next. Right? Like, you're all the same. You're all here to just exploit us. And, in fact, I don't even think he's formed an ally and made a front there. It's like, all right, well, this one will stay out of says he'll stay out of my way more than the other ones, at least, that were trying to rule us. Like, you're no better than the rest. And if you really want to get like touch some like live wire third rail stuff, like I was reading something by a former CIA interrogator that they captured an ISIS terrorist, and she said the moment that stuck with her, where she ended up retiring because it just became too much, and she sort of lost the faith, was when he said, you Americans, when you watch Star Wars, you think you're the people in the desert, the good guys, and the Empire's the bad one. To us, it's the other way around. We're the rebels that are in the desert, and this huge machine comes to stomp us and come through us, and it just exploit us for our materials. And you get a lot more of that out of Dune, where it's like two big clashing houses, and then the indigenous people are like, who the fuck what do I care about your palace politics and your spacing guilds and your emperors? Like, you're just here to take our shit.
Andy, you got anything on the characterization there with Paul and maybe the people around him?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I'm just kind of reacting to, what Flo Corney here is saying, hero's journey, architecture, and Brian's here says, I think Paul clued us in to the future with the jihad vision. That's where the white savior trope is cracked for me. I mean, so to me, that's very much it, is that there is a groundwork that is laid going, look, here is the fuel with, and now we're going to break all of that. And that's, that's kind of the fascinating thing of your favorite word. What is it?
We'd love to some subversion.
Subversion.
The Freman saved Paul. By the way, Paul doesn't save the Freman.
I gotta say, I'm not seeing any of these comments. So like, all of this is new to me. But like, that's cool. There's like active discussion going on. But what I'm curious about is like, so Andy, it feels like you've done some like studying post film, but like, Benja, like, do you get that, like, just from this film, that like I kind of felt like do you watch this film and feel like, oh, they're setting up the hero's journey just to subvert it, or
No, so a little before I had looked into Dune, and I was like, Dune, you mean that silly movie from '84?
okay.
I still liked it, but they
Yeah.
no, he subverts stuff, and that got me even farther away. I'm like, oh, here we go with the whole subversion thing, being weird to be weird, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, I was actually on the side of the haters, ready to hate this movie. And I got into it, and I'm starting to watch it, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of how they're forming this persona, this character, this way of telling a story. So yeah, when I watched it and was seeing this hero's journey thing playing out in the way it wasn't the case of just being weird to be weird or just doing something different to do something different. I think there are very strong characterization, not necessarily points, but points of view being put out there that are definitely worth exploring. And yeah, there is, at least in my eyes, there was no really good force. There are just these forces moving around, and you're curious as to how they move from one scene to the next, between scenes, across characters, across guilds, etc. Yeah. It's all this very interesting flow that got me wrapped up and engrossed into it. As Andy called it, gripping. So I'm actually with Andy on this side. So amazing, right?
Did Paul engender any amount of sympathy in his situation? Like what age does he come off and like his mother mentioned he had never fought and killed a man when he fought Jamis. Do these things sort of build connections with you and the character, or is it still sort of standoffish a little bit?
It's actually kind of,
what do you think?
It's actually kind of standoffish to me, where I'm not necessarily connected with him. I'm watching his ride, but I'm not like, okay, I'm putting myself in this character's position, as I said, because right off the bat, he shows up in the film pretty much fully formed, and all he needs.
Right, he's this palace youth who's lived a sheltered life, and you never see any of his peers. And so you have to assume he's just surrounded by the highborn constantly, right? Probably spoiled out of his
Which is
mind.
kind of funny because I thought that the few 2 moments that he showed happiness, oh hi, runs over and hugs someone. It felt like very Luke to me.
And plus his friend is like his friend is the most lethal killer in the setting.
Yeah, and then you run over and like hug.
Like it's like being friends with a lion.
Yeah, exactly. A guy of
What kind of childhood is that? It's just weird.
Well, I mean, it's also like, cause what it's right after that scene, right before when we see him training with
Gurney.
Yeah, with Gurney.
Yeah. Thanos. Yeah, they didn't make any dumb jokes, but
I'm glad he didn't snap anything. Yeah.
But so it's but that's also, that's such a wonderful, again, just really smart pacing in terms of your contrast of seeing here he is with this lethal soldier, and he's kind of putting him down in this big brother thing. And then immediately contrasted with him basically being, showed up, and kind of like tough loved, with you, we're turning you into a killing machine.
Yeah.
Right.
So to answer, Donnie, to give another answer to your question, usually when I'm watching movies, films, or anything that has like the story narrative, even video games, I'm usually thinking of a protagonist. And I don't mean that in the sense of a hero, one guy or one girl or one person going out to do something.
Somebody driving the action.
Not even somebody. I'm thinking of an idea, a noun, an idea, place, or thing moving through the story. So if you say the protagonist is the city, then the city's got to fight against taxes or crime or whatever. And at the end of the movie, the entire city's happy because whatever. It could be a city, a house, a group of people, an idea, a concept. The thing that got me with this movie is that it was hard for me to place a central protagonist or idea that I'm following the story through.
Yeah.
But I didn't dislike it, which was very weird for me. I'm like, okay, I'm not necessarily following them or this or that idea or that concept. I'm just watching this whole thing swirl around and flow forward in this story. So that's
So you didn't feel Paul, like things centered around Paul as a protagonist.
I felt Paul was more of a
he has very little agency.
I didn't want to tell Brian. I didn't want to take Brian's word here, but I felt like a pawn. But he felt like.
But I mean, that's still, but that doesn't. Because like even if like you're talking like a city is the protagonist, a city doesn't necessarily have a will of its own. It is shaped, it is molded.
Well, sure. Like we say, corporations are people. Corporation has an idea. It wants to do this. When movies or these shows are usually presented, it's like, well, the city or the corporation or the group has this idea of, here we are, we go through this inciting incident, we have a problem, we meet up with the greater knowledge, a mentor, the hero's journey. It still usually happens in that way. Uh, I'm actually agreeing to the fact that I think this subverted it quite a bit in where we could use Paul as maybe a point to try to latch on to, but it kind of doesn't work, at least not for me.
Is it
Uh,
fair to say, like, is it fair to, like, what I'm hearing you saying that Paul lacked a purpose, or like he, even if he was like not that I were to, if I were to put it, like, nicely, I would say like, oh, he found his purpose late in the movie, almost like the very last scenes. But like, I could see now through that criticism of like, it's not like he was hunting for purpose. He didn't have his own, what is my purpose in life, sort of like where that pays off with him finding a purpose of going to the Freeman.
yes. It doesn't even have to be a conscious decision to follow a purpose, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's this flow of the story that follows. And I don't necessarily think that it centers around, Paul's story. I think Paul is a spark, is a force, a piece in this whole situation. But the more interesting thing about it, and why we keep talking about world building and the whole political setting, is that the grander ideas are more of a story than Paul himself or any
Yeah.
easily identified.
That's an interesting.
Yeah. I could see that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I wonder if that was Villeneuve's genius to sort of position Paul as another piece on the board, albeit a very potent piece.
Right.
I'm wondering if he did that on purpose, because I noticed the same thing. And now that you mention it, there is sort of a where's the story here type of feel to the movie.
Yeah. Like
Right.
there's a strong purpose behind the father, right? Okay, to save his house by walking intentionally into this trap and to ally with this people that the Harkonnens and Empire and everyone else didn't understand. There's a strong purpose to Duncan. He's the warrior. He's loyal to the family. He goes out in the recon spirit war to protect his. There's a strong purpose to the mother, right? Like protect his her son. There's a little bit of like, okay, what's her sort of like duplicitous? Is it duplicitous? That like, but at least it's there in your question. There is a little bit of like, for Paul, if the sort of like, if Dan's
Getting swept up.
yeah, getting swept up in things, and that's, I think, to me, I think that's why I liked where that ended with him choosing, no, sorry, mom, I'm making a different choice. This is how I'm going to honor my dad's insights,
You leave me alone. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go do drugs.
Go kill this guy.
But think about it. With him, his decision isn't about him. It's about the entire line of people, right? Like he's the last, and so it's he for him to even take agency over that is like it's late in the movie, but that's the one spark that I saw.
I mean, he's
He's driven. My take on this, my take on this is, yeah, is I mean, I absolutely agree, and that's I was still able to actually latch onto him as a protagonist. And like I said, to me, the thing that really makes the movie for me is that transition of once he's confronted with the mother, right? And
I'm so happy you say that.
and the whole film takes a turn, right?
Yep.
It absolutely becomes Jessica's movie at that point.
Hmm.
And even though he starts, driving, and that's like ultimately his, for lack of a better term, his Obi-Wan Kenobi moment, right?
Yeah.
When his mentors die and he's left to make a decision and pull forward, but it becomes Jessica's story, watching him become something scary, right?
Yeah.
And that's fascinating to me, right? That you can take a movie and change its point of view from one character to the next. And that's how it, I mean, I think that if you wanted to take a sheet of paper and beat it out, it's like, here's journey structure is still there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But it flips when you change perspective, and it reboots the thing so that you can't see the structure anymore.
Yeah.
Because you're now made to like wonder where you, the audience, allegiance lives, right? Which creates a fascinating relationship with you and your characters.
Well, is it a hero's journey or a villain? Right.
Well, it's funny
There's
that
that.
Or a descent into darkness, right?
it's funny that we call it a hero's journey too, because he doesn't win and he doesn't rescue anyone. There's glimpses of the future where he might, right? But if you think about it, like it's a very modern movie in that it's almost like an Empire Strikes Back type ending. Like it's very downer. Like, it's I was kind of surprised at where it ended. In hindsight, it makes sense. You're setting up this whole world, but it did very much feel like a part one. I thought it was bold of the director to put part one in the titles before part two was even greenlit, because it's they walk into a trap, the trap is triggered, and they're fucking crushed. Like that's the movie. Like,
Yeah. And they're just fleeing for their life, right? They're not really doing much but fleeing.
Yeah. I think this is a worthy, it was a worthy, definitely worthy by, Denis Villeneuve, putting this whole thing out, putting it together. Like Andy and I have talked about with the evolution of storytelling, you're not dealing with a story that you have to start from, very central beginning and end cleanly at the end. We've talked about it on the internet. We've discussed things on, whatever going into it. I'm watching, hey, here's Dune explained in 5 minutes. I'm watching these MPS videos, right?
So please ask me, don't watch this.
Yeah. So yeah, there's this whole weirdness about how stories are told now. And I think you can get a weird, mix up of different types of or more layered storytelling. I was about to say folded, but no puns here except for Al. So I like what he did. And what I'm wondering now is how this really changes things, sets things up. We're at 2 hours here, so we'll want to kind of wrap this up and let me get your thoughts on where we're going with this sci-fi. And we all kind of enjoyed it here. So just some closing thoughts, I guess, on this and where we're going.
I'll go first real quick. I don't watch a lot of movies. I mean, I watch a fair amount. So I don't know if there's any other directors like Villeneuve right now, but there might be. But I think he's sort of a singular standalone director in the movies he's making with Sicario, Blade Runner, this one, and Arrival. I don't see a lot of people making movies like him, taking sort of the risks with pacing that he does. Blade Runner was a slow burn. This one's pretty slow and sort of stops and starts in a few places. So I hope people copy him because I think he's great, and I'll watch anything he makes.
I don't want to see copies. I don't. I'm not even a big fan of Villeneuve. I thought Blade Runner was, and I wanted to walk out of that one. I saw it in a great theater.
But Sicario, have you seen that one?
I liked it. Thought it needed to be a little more punchy in certain ways, but yeah, he's not up there in my list of on top of mind directors as being awesome.
Well, we'll agree to disagree then.
It's already about something. I liked it, but it's not like
competent. Wow. Okay.
I should know that. And no matter how smart it is, I just didn't connect with it. How's that?
Sure.
Good quality. He knows what he's doing. Not necessarily that I'm connecting with what he's doing. This I connect with a lot more.
Yeah. So I won't take any more time.
In that vein, I mean, I'm like trying to temper my expectations of Eternals, just because there is so much buzz around the director Chloe Zhao and how she is like schooling filmmakers on filmmaking right now, and the early reports are that she made a Marvel movie that doesn't look anything like a Marvel movie and doesn't fall into its trappings. And so that's interesting to have this this Dune, and then 2 weeks later having this Chloe Zhao Marvel film out there to very popular pop culture franchises. that are apparently swinging for the fences of terms of storytelling and genre, right? So what that does mean, right, for kind of, that evolution and what comes next, right? It's like did we have kind of a bump in fantasy filmmaking after Lord of the Rings? Yeah, I think we did. And yeah, I think we saw kind of that influence kind of impact. What this will have um is anyone's guess, because it is so far reaching, right? Um, I mean, even still, it's like, you can look back on Lord of the Rings, and it's very straightforward, basic hero's journey storytelling. Um, but these are not so simple structurally that what we're talking about for.
I love it.
Well, I mean, it's like simple in a sense that
Yeah, totally.
we get comfortable with stories because they match the structure, right?
Yeah.
We can go into it with a sense of safety. It's
McDonald's is popular for a reason.
Well, but not even just McDonald's. I can go to any restaurant in America and expect the same three courses of here's super salad, here's the main course, and then there's dessert, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to, when people go to, a Chinese banquet for the first time, and then there's like 9 courses, and it's just one dish that shows up, and it's like a crab, and like, I don't know what is this dessert or is this what do I do with this thing, right? And
So
changing that format.
Yeah.
right. I think this is where we always get into the discussion of, you're more on the side of, hey, let's experiment and try things out. I'm on the side of, look, I want you to try things out, but don't just be weird to be weird. And, don't, there's a meme going around like, don't F up Thanksgiving dinner. That's how I'm usually looking at it. Like, why would you do that to the turkey? Or, But anyway,
See, and I have the law of leaving Chinese sticky rice and nothing. I'm just like, I love it.
By the way, I don't know if everyone can see on Instagram. I'm loving the cross court volleys between the two of you. That's right there. But I would feel like Dune, to me, it felt like it struck a nice balance between those two worlds of like, yeah, there is a little bit of, Lawrence of Arabia, Dancing with Wolves structure to it, because it is based on real life events where these types of big conquests and issues came from, but also a lot of experimentation and a lot of also just like a palate cleanser from it. But in the spirit of my cross court interaction here, I'm going to receive the lob that Donnie took and say that art is very subjective, but I definitely am on Team Donnie when it comes to the movies this guy's making. Like it's very much like a Christopher Nolan. Like he hits my frequency. Like he's making original IP the way it should be. Like Christopher Nolan, his Inception is basically his version of a Bond film, right? There's a lot of honor Secret Service from that one. Tenet is like more modern take, like, but without actually doing that IP. Tenet literally goes forwards and backwards in time, in the movie itself as well. Like there's all this experiment.
And the name.
Yeah, exactly. And I felt like to me, like I felt like I said, a sense of relief when I came out of this, but I also felt like a welcome back. Like I do watch a lot of movies. One of the things I missed the most from all my years of living in San Francisco and then moving down recently is the Metreon. That IMAX screen it's hard to describe to people. Like I saw Dark Knight Returns there, and I've seen other movies where it was like a religious experience. It was incredible. And like this to me, Andy's group of friends have been, no joke, like a massive sanity saver. We've done these Zooms where we've gone through Marvel movies and watched stuff, and it's been great, and it's been a great structure for my life. But in terms of recently going back to the movies, this felt like a movie. This is what I was looking forward to. I did want that experience of it washing over me, partly because I knew the story too well from the books and stuff. So I kind of wanted to like numb that part of my brain and just take it in. And it gives me a lot of hope. Like it just gives me a lot of hope for storytelling and sci-fi. And frankly, I'm just happy that they're pulling from this very adult, complex material where there's so much more of it, and you can go deep on it. It's like it's almost like, hey, now I can. This is my version of like the way Andy can quote like Star Trek season 3, episode 17, line 15, or whatever. Like like, I can be that guy with Dune now. Because even though it's been,
You're looking forward to the Dune cinematic universe?
I am looking forward to the DCU. That's right.
I mean, that is a question though. Do you think this can push to doing all the books?
I don't know.
They get really weird,
Yeah, they did get weird. And that's fine.
like really weird.
Yeah. Like but in ways that I absolutely love. But here's
Me too.
as many people said Dune was unfilmable. There's an entire documentary that I mentioned about how unfilmable it was. This movie was so like true to the spirit of the book and so watchable that I thought, all right, well, whatever, fuck it. I won't underestimate its other stuff either. So I'm gonna take a rain check on that question until after either part 2 or the Sisterhood series comes out to HBO, because the Sisterhood series, all this weird shit about world building via religion and manipulating people and whatever. Like, if they can handle that right, then I'll be like, oh, fuck it, whatever. Then they can handle talking sandworms or whatever the fuck else comes next,
All right. So yeah, as I said, this exceeded my expectations. For the first, I don't know how many minutes, I was still a hater while I was watching it, but one meal.
So I had no idea about that. That's funny.
Yeah, as I said, my last outing on one of the bigger budget movie was Blade Runner, and I kind of felt a little let down by that one.
why didn't we get together again and talk
Not
about
let down,
so
but
we can correct the record on that?
What's he saying?
so big, so colorful, so unnecessary. But yeah, as for this, I loved it. Thought it was pretty cool. A lot of layers to it. I really enjoyed it. And I'm really excited to see the evolution of storytelling taking some proper steps, I think, in what a lot of what we've been talking about is, hey, can you add multiple stories? Can you reference things? Can you make something that's understandable to the internet audience who's been, fighting over this stuff for months or years ahead of the release? And can it be enjoyable for people who are just now getting into it? Do stories have to be so linear? Do stories have to be so single layered? No, they can keep going forward and they can grow. And I'm really happy that this is happening on the sci-fi front, which I think has been kind of lacking, at least for me, in the past couple of years, several years.
Yeah.
So I want to see more
Well said.
stuff. And I'm definitely glad that I got all 4 of us here together to talk this out. This will save me a lot of time in typing on Facebook. So
No, it won't.
I've gotten a lot of the questions out of my system.
Oh, okay.
I'll see stuff on Facebook and then, go brush my teeth. And did he really just say that? Okay, let me go back and ask. And then it piles up to a bunch of time that's wasted. I think getting this discussion out of the way was very good. And definitely I'll be posting this to the podcast stream so everybody will be able to check it out there. Donnie, Andy, Al, you're great people to have on this and discuss things with. So I want to thank everybody for coming through, and be sure to follow along with the podcast, and I will see you all later.
Thanks for having us.
2 years.
See you.